I am very excited to be back. I haven't seen you for, I think, about 3 months, but during that time, uh, we've had some hosts stand in who have been exceptionally capable. Alexa did a fantastic job last month, and I'm back this month with a very, very special guest who I have been trying to convince to do this show with me for the last 70 years. Actually, that's sort of true. And he's here with me tonight. He's my closest friend. And I've been listening to his performances for the longest time. I'd like to welcome Mr. Mark Kissin, FRCS. Hello.
Hi there. How you doing?
I'm doing. How are you doing? Now, look here. I'm calling you Mr. Mark Kissin, but you're a doctor, right?
Yes,
Now,
but
how come you're a doctor? You'll have to explain this to the American audience.
okay. So first of all, hi from Guildford. Guildford's 30 miles south of London. It's 3:30 in the morning. I'm a Mister because I'm a doctor, and it all goes back to Henry VIII. Henry VIII and the barber surgeons. The doctors were the clever people. The surgeons were not so clever. And so the doctor said, hey, get that Mister over here and he'll chop your leg off. And so the Misters were called Mister, abbreviated to M and little r, Mister. When I became a doctor, my Jewish grandmother was very pleased, said, I got a grandson, the doctor. When I became a Mister, she said, what's this Mister business? When are you going to be a professor?
Well, listen, Professor, would you say that you are no stranger to performing? When was the
No,
first time? When was the first time you ever gave a performance? Can you remember when was your first performance? How old were you?
I think I was probably five at junior school, and I have to say I was in drag. I was in the story of Christmas, and I was a little girl. But what can you do?
Was that Shirley House?
No, before that.
Before Shirley
Oh
House?
no, it was at Haberdashers Junior School
Oh,
in
okay.
in Flower Lane.
Oh, in Flower Lane. Okay. So Mark and I were actually at school together in Shirley House, even before he went on to the secondary school where we were still at school together. Um, where does this performance gene come from?
Well, as you know, it comes predominantly from my father, who could sell coals to Newcastle, which means he was very good at selling any item to the person who already had it. He could make them have another one.
Right.
And so as a child, I was brought up on the Marx Brothers, on Gilbert and Sullivan, boxing, and entertainment and sporting events.
And how you've taken that into your medical career, I would say. Is
Yes,
that
and that
fair?
started when I was at Cambridge. I auditioned and got a part as a bit of a stooge in the medical review. And then I started doing my own reviews. And wherever I worked, I did a review, either writing script, choreography, singing, acting, going to get pieces of material to make into costumes, you name it, I've done it.
Wow. 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 How many medical reviews would you say you've done in your
Uh,
career?
Probably about 30.
Oh my gosh. Do you remember all the words
Uh,
to
as
everything
as my
you read?
children will tell you, and my wife, unfortunately, yes.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking, and I'm thinking that we ought to start off your performance with a song. And
Okay.
maybe a song from one of your reviews, one of your skits Maybe one of your favorites. What you got up your sleeve there?
Okay, so this was a sketch loosely based on Woody Allen's film Sleeper, but instead of being about people in the future, it was about geriatrics or old folk. And of course, as one gets older, you push the barriers. I'm 72, 73, and that's in the prime of life. Old people are really old, but the song is using the music that was made popular in the 50s and revisited by Ringo Starr. The song being "You're Beautiful, You're 16, and You're Mine." He came well when and this all revolves around an older person coming in as an emergency into the A&E department. He came in through the door, 4:45, incontinent of urine. He's 80, hemiplegic, and his mind. His speech, it was slurred, vision was blurred, positive Babinski sign. He's 80, hemiplegic, and his mind. Who loves you, baby? What's your name? You took me away from the poker game. I took your pulse. The beat was wrong. Even I couldn't get the diagnosis wrong. You went out of CAS and up to the ward. Now you're a normal saline. You're 80, hemiplegic, and you're mine. We'll take some blood. We'll scan your brain. You never get any peace again. Zimmer frames, physiotherapist, stick a catheter in with a flick of the wrist. Sores that won't heal, meals within wheels. You'll have a real good time. You're 80, hemiplegic, and you're mine. La 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 la, you're 80, hemiplegic, and you're mine.
Yay! Okay. Okay. And what was that for? What show, what review was
That was
that
a
for?
show at the Middlesex Hospital. It was called Amenomania, and it was a sketch all about geriatricians.
Okay. Now, how when you you're a surgeon, you operate in a theater, correct?
Yeah, that's
And
correct. Well, not anymore. I'm retired, as you know.
no, well, right, but you did for many years. You operated in a theater. How did you use those performance skills in the theater?
Well, you've said the word theatre. The operating theatre is a place where everybody has a part. Some parts are bigger than others, and the surgeon has the biggest part. And that's why we want to do it. You could call it showing off, but you could say that somebody has to be at the top of that pyramid and take control, but bring all the other people into play. So being in a theater, I wanted people to come and watch me operate. I think I could teach them something. They could also teach me something, and in a relaxed atmosphere, as long as everything is done properly, then that's a good environment to share tips on how you can do something to the patient's benefit.
And what about in terms of you interacting with your patient? I mean, I happen to know, I'm not just saying this, that your patients loved you. I know
Well,
that.
that's
Oh,
very,
many of them did.
that's very kind. Well, so you interact when you've got a patient and you're dealing with cancer, then that's a difficult conversation. And you know, it's nothing that you're taught how to do. I think it's a skill you either have or you don't have. And if you have that skill, you try out your routine. You assess each and every one of those patients. How much information do they want? Do they want it light? Do they want it very interactive? And you can use the skills of communication, which I'll talk about later in my slideshow, to bring out what you need to bring out, because you know something at that first, particularly that first interview, they're not going to remember very much. And that interview, but when they look back on it, that interview is the most important interview of their medical journey.
Right. So your career has largely been as a surgical oncologist,
Yeah.
and mostly with breast and melanoma, correct?
Yeah, I would say 80% breast and 20% melanoma.
And
People said to me that, oh, you're doing melanoma for light relief. I said, no, it's the other way around.
yeah, so was the melanoma because of the fellowship that you did in Australia, and because I know
No,
Melbourne had
no,
their-
I think it's a quirk of the British system that because some of the operations were the same operations, particularly lymphadenectomy, that in people's training and the societies we were members of, it sort of went together.
And
Um,
how did you come to breast cancer when you were deciding where you want what type of surgeon you wanted to be?
I wanted to do that right from the beginning. Why? Because there were some really, really nice senior surgeons who were breast surgeons who sort of adopted me, and they were rounded people. They liked all the things that I liked about breast cancer. Its humanity, its everything was first. It was first for screening, first for genetics, first for chemotherapy, hormone therapy. So it involved young people, a large number, and there were breakthroughs all the time. And that's what appealed. But these particular guys really influenced me favorably.
And you made quite a name for yourself in breast cancer. With respect to the sentinel nodes, is that correct?
Yeah, as you know, it nearly never happened because I have this problem flying, and I was due to go to Amsterdam to learn the technique because they were very much ahead of the curve. There was Amsterdam, there was Milan, and there was UCLA, and I was due to go, and there was a terrible storm, and I didn't want to get on the plane. So anyway, I did get on another plane a few days later, and I learned the technique. I brought it back to this country, and people would come to me from all over the country to have sentinel node biopsy. It was new, and then a group of us would go around to their hospitals and teach them how to do it. We were involved in all the trials, and it was a great privilege.
So what was the concept of these sentinel nodes that you were able to tell how extensive the cancer was from examining the sentinel nodes?
No. The driver was you could remove thousands and thousands of lymph nodes to find out whether patients were positive or negative. But all those that were negative, you'd done a disservice because, yeah, it's good they were negative, but it means they were at risk of a swollen arm unnecessarily.
Right.
So the sentinel node concept was put forward as saying, can we learn that information in a way that has less detriment to the patient? And I would use diagrams for my patients to say, listen, I want you to think of this as traveling on the train. You travel on the train from where we are up to London, it's 12 stations. So if we do sentinel node, we can go to the first station and say, any cancer here? Yes or no? And if it's no, we assume that all the other stations are clean. And so we didn't need to go to those stations. So patients could understand the concept. Look at the first place, and if you've got that place is clean, everything else will be good.
Is
that way, less damage.
is that concept true? Obviously for breast cancer, but is it true for other is the sentinel node used in other
It
cancers
is
as well?
used. It is now used quite widely for many cancers. The advantage, say, for breast and even for melanoma is if you've got something here, that's the breast, it's not going to go down your leg. But if you've got something in your abdomen, it can go all over the place. So it's less accurate to find the pathways in intra-abdominal malignancy than malignancies that have a extremity or a place where there's likely to be trouble.
So you managed to combine your performance skills with your professional skills, not only in the operating theater, but when you did presentations on the art of the breast. How did that come about? And maybe you can show us a few of your slides.
Well, yeah, we'll switch the slides in a minute, but it came about because I did a fellowship in Melbourne in Australia, and the hospital I went to was called St. Vincent's, and St. Vincent's was a Catholic hospital, and it still had a load of nuns, and it had this huge religious library, ecclesiastical library of, and I was able to look up things about St. Agatha. St. Agatha is the patron saint of breast cancer, the principal one. I'll tell you a bit more about her in a minute. And I submitted this as a paper, like you would submit a paper to any international meeting, and it was accepted. I think it was accepted because they thought it was a bit crazy. And it was accepted, and it went down very well, and I introduced all kinds of audience participation in it, and they thought it was great. And after that, they decided, well, Kissin's done very well. Let's set him a different subject for next conference. So they set me the role of breast in art, and that went very well. And so that cascaded the breast in music, in poetry, and literature. And then it got to a point I could choose my own subject. And so that went into famous breasts and so on. But we'll talk about that. Shall I go to the slides?
I would love for you to show us some of these slides.
Okay. Now there should be some.
There you go.
No, I've lost it. What's happened? Oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
PowerPoint at the bottom.
Stop share.
There you go. Share again.
No, do apologize. I'll get rid of.
I think you're doing fine. Go try your share screen. Well,
share screen.
Do you see? Are you looking at Zoom?
Have we got it?
No. In your Zoom, click the green button that says share screen.
I've just got to get rid of my show that's come up.
Okay.
I've lost Zoom. That's the problem.
Okay. Hit Alt Tab.
You're going to have to help me get back.
So on your keyboard, hold Alt and then hit Tab.
I've found myself on YouTube by mistake.
Okay. Do you have any icons at the bottom?
Yep.
What do you see? Do you see one that says Zoom?
Yeah, I'm pressing it, but nothing's happening. I'll go to there.
What are you in right now? Can you minimize anything?
Oh, we
There we
got
go.
it.
Slideshow
Where's slideshow?
at
Oh,
the
I see.
top.
At the top. There you go.
And then from beginning.
Right. And the good news is nobody lost a life.
Okay, so sorry about that, folks. The art of the whistle-stop tour. So I told you it was patron saints at the beginning, and then I told you all these other things came up between 1992 and 2010. So let's start off in the patron saints of breast disease. There you see a map of Sicily, and you focus there on the east coast, Catania. Catania, there's a lady called Agatha. Agatha, she was martyred in the year 251. The Roman governor Diocletian, you see a picture of him at the bottom left. He took a fancy to her, and she resisted his advances. He didn't like this, so he had her tortured, and she was tortured by having both breasts removed. And there have been many, many depictions of this terrible event by lots of artists over the centuries. You see Catania there is in the foothills of Mount Etna. And the first miracle was that she was visited by St. Peter that night. Her breast mysteriously regrew overnight, and this annoyed the governor even more. And he had her put to sword. And when she died, Mount Etna erupted. So she's the patron saint of volcanoes, earthquakes, as well as breasts. And a few hundred years later, there was an eruption of Etna, and they took one of her relics, her veil, and they laid it across the lava flow, and the lava flow was diverted away from the town. So she became more and more famous. So you will see depictions of her by different artists. There's hundreds of pictures, and in Catania you can go to the cathedral there, and there'll be some statues of her. You'll see that quite often they will have the breasts on a plate, or the picture of her in the process of the mutilation, or being visited by the angel, even some more modern ones. So St. Agatha is really quite important. February the 4th is her feast day, so it's been quite recent. There are some other breast saints. There's two others here I show you. We got Gwen Thiers-Brun, a French saint from Brittany, and she was born with 3 breasts, and was therefore able to suckle 3 babies at once, and this made her very, very desirable. And on this side, we see some Winifred's Well. Some Winifred's Well is near Llandudno, Ricky, so near where you came from. And St. Winifred was martyred there, where her head fell, because she was beheaded, where her head fell, a spring came from the ground, and this spring is supposed to have healing properties. People in the Middle Ages came there, and they were said to be cured of their cancers. So, you know, in the old days when there was no cures, no medical cures, people would look towards religion to give them cures for their ailments, and so these things sprang up. And you will see, for instance, other saints, say St. Lucy. She was martyred by having her eyes put out. You'll see pictures of her with eyes on a plate, and these are all very evocative. The next slide I show you an adopted saint of needle localization. So when we have a cancer in the breast that you can't feel, you put a needle in to guide you to how to do the surgery. So radiologists, breast radiologists have sort of adopted Saint Sebastian, who was martyred by having arrows fired at him, as being the patron saint of breast localization. But beware, make sure you go to a good radiologist. Otherwise, you could be in trouble. Now, let's move on. Breast in art. And here we've got some sculptures. In the middle there, we've got the Venus of Willendorf, a very old prehistoric Neolithic little votive that was found. Here we have Diana of Ephesus, many-breasted person. Of course, we have the Amazons who bared one breast. And over here, we've got Tutankhamun, a picture of Tutankhamun, and you see that he has gynecomastia. He has quite considerable breasts, and this has led to all kinds of theories about the inbreded nature of the Egyptian royal family. And was that responsible, or could he have had Klinefelter's syndrome or something similar? By the way, look at the Venus de Milo there. She's missing arms, but somehow that doesn't seem as terrible as if she'd had one breast missing. And let alone sculpture, we can move to art, and Dutch art of that's Cranach the Elder, dating 1509. It's in the National Gallery in London. You'll see how the physiognomy of the Northern European type was very slender with small breasts. We have a Rubens where bodies are a bit fuller, but breasts are still small. And then we have much more modern things who tell it like it is in this age of obesity. The artist there is Jenny Saville, and that's a self-portrait called Branded, which was painted in 1991, and 2011 it was sold for £1.5 million. My favorite picture is in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, and this is has a subtitle of The Jewish Bride. I like that painting because I use that painting as a way of teaching people to do breast examination and breast screening. Let's move from art, poetry. Here I give you Shylock, and the whole crux of the matter in The Merchant of Venice is that Shylock is said, yes, you can have your pound of flesh from Antonio, but you have to take it from his heart. And so he's given the painful task of, can he possibly kill to get his promised payment or not? And of course, it's one of the plays of Shakespeare that has an almost quite deep anti-Semitic ring to it. The breast in music. How could they possibly do a whole opera that involves breast? There's a picture of a man called Francois Poulenc, French composer, and he wrote an opera called Les Mamelles de Titirias, and this was written in the aftermath of the Second World War. It was written in 45. It was first performed in 47. And the concept here was, was trans, that women who were in vast excess because of the loss of life of men in the war, women could be transformed into men. Now, when we did this, we had people singing some arias from this particular opera, and at the end of them, we had inflated brass balloons inside their dresses, which floated up to the ceiling. So it was quite dramatic. They changed their gender. Unfortunately, the next day, when somebody else was in that theater doing an ordinary lecture, there were a load of balloons on near the ceiling. That was slightly unfortunate. And there's another one that's from Chorus Line. The main bit of that is it's called Dance 10 Looks 3, but the song finishes the line tits and ass can change your life. That certainly changed mine. Now we come on to famous press, and I'm going to take you back to Amsterdam. That's Rembrandt's house. And here's a picture of Rembrandt's mistress or lover or pretend wife, because he was married, but he had a relationship long-term with this lady called Hendrike Stoffels. And if I draw your attention to the lateral aspect here of the left breast, that it's been thought by many commentators over the time that this was a true depiction, and therefore this lady had to have breast cancer when this was painted. So I sent my registrar, my intern, across to Amsterdam to try and find the post-mortem records, and we found that she didn't have breast cancer, but she did have tuberculosis of the breast, and tuberculosis was rife in Amsterdam at that time. Now, you saw a picture, a preview of Dolly Parton there, because another registrar for famous breasts I sent off to find out more about Dolly, but not Dolly Parton. And it was about Dolly the sheep, because Dolly the sheep, who was the first mammal to be cloned in the world, and that was back in the 1980s, Dolly the sheep was cloned from a breast cell. So that's why she's very famous. And the third and final registrar that I had at the time, I sent off to investigate this. This is what you will find on the top of a Rolls-Royce car, and it's called the Spirit of Ecstasy. And the Spirit of Ecstasy was a carving made of this lady. This lady is called Eleanor Thornton, and she became the muse and lover of John Edward Montagu, who became a baron at Beaulieu. And at the Beaulieu Museum, you can find out lots of information. This is in Hampshire, near the coast. So her body was made into that depiction of what is on the front of a Rolls-Royce. Breast and the media, you know, when somebody famous gets breast cancer, be it Martina Navratilova or some of these English stars, and we have Kylie Minogue in the bottom left-hand corner, when somebody gets breast cancer who's famous, you'd think it would be good. Well, it is good, not obviously good for them, but it's good for the business, if you like, because it makes people aware. But as they found in this report from the Royal Gwent Hospital in Wales, what it did, she got cancer, and they had a huge number of extra people flooding their clinics. And we would call them the worried well. And the problem with the worried well, they overwhelm you. And if you're overwhelmed, you're doing all this extra work, but you're getting very little return for it. Now, having given you a bit of information there, I just want to concentrate on plain talk and medical jargon. As I said to you earlier, that first interview when you are diagnosed with cancer, with your first interview with your overseeing physician, is so important, and you've got to be on your toes on how you give that information. And for this reason, we all, in this country, we all had to do an advanced communication skills program to enable us to be better at giving information and listening to the patient and tailing things accordingly. A residential course. And when I was asked to give a talk about communication to the European breast group in Switzerland, I did it with music. I did all songs for all these different parts of the patient journey. And I'm just going to give you some examples.
You got to accentuate the positive, eliminate the
accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative. And you'd think it'd be very easy to be positive in your communication, but what is the meaning of positive? So as far as lymph nodes go, you want to be positive, but remember, if your nodes are positive, actually that's bad. So you can't be too positive about something that's bad. And of course, the other side of the coin is the same. Negative nodes are good. And so this makes communication very, very difficult, even more difficult when you have more sophisticated tests where 1+ of a antibody-driven test can be positive, but that means it's negative, and only if it's 3 positive is it positive. So can you be positive if things are negative? Of course, we all have to break bad news, and your oncologist, a surgical oncologist, everybody in the team has to be good at breaking bad news. And so these are the songs that may be appropriate. I heard it on the grapevine. You don't want to be doing that. I heard the news today. Tell me on a Sunday, please. We can't always do these things. Start spreading the news. Yes, once you tell one person, it's going to go round the block. And it's probably that first bad news interview is the most important consultation of the whole procedure. So here's Julie Andrews singing a song from Sound of Music by Rodgers and Hammerstein. I changed the words and I'll sing it for you. This is what the breast care nurse might have sung. Plasters on stitches with drains and with dressings, stick on prosthesis, it's all so depressing. You've lost your libido and using E-strings. These are a few of my favorite things. Flaps with necrosis, aromas keep filling, some spreading redness. Quick, get penicillin. We don't want to keep you, your only short stay. Out of our ward or be our RSA. When the text ping, when the phone rings, when patients seem so bad, I simply remember my favorite things and then I don't feel so bad.
Man's got a heart.
Lastly, I'll take you through choosing an operation.
Joking apart.
Ron Moody singing for Oliver. I'm reviewing the situation. So let's review the situation as a surgeon. What operation are we going to do? A surgeon has a heart, hasn't he? Joking apart, hasn't he? I pray every day to Agatha, our saint, and hope in the post at the most there's only one complaint. I am reviewing the operation. Do I need to take off all her breast? Or could I do conservation and give DXT to the rest? Don't want her to grow more cancer. Lots of tissue is the answer. Margins close, I'll take some shavings. Take too much, be like crazy paving. At least I can show some sort of willing by finding the gaps with lipofilling. Maybe not. I think I'll have to think it out again. So with all of that, receiving bad news, the important bottom line for all us physicians, must be honest. We must tell the truth. And we must always give the patient some hope that even if it looks severe and down, there may still be a way out of it. And I'd just like to dedicate all of this to one of my previous colleagues, senior to me, who ran those Nottingham conferences, Professor Roger Blaney, a very wise man, a very kind man. And when he died, his widow distributed all his flamboyant ties to the rest of us. I got first pick of the ties. I got a beautiful tie. But you know what? Since COVID, nobody wears a tie. A great shame. So I'm going to finish that bit there.
I love it. I love it. I think I've been waiting to see those slides for 40 years, I think. It must be. How long ago was it you were in at St. Vincent's?
Oh, crikey. Our second daughter was born there. It's 1988, 89. Long time ago.
Funnily enough, I just was watching a webinar last week with a nuclear therapy doc from St. Vincent's in Melbourne. So Louise Emmett. So I knew about St. Vincent's. I just learned about St. Vincent's. Well, that was wonderful, Mark. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. One of the questions that I have for you is you used you did surgery on the BBC, right? They filmed you live. Tell us that story about how did that come about, and were you performing in that one?
And how did it come about? I can't even remember how I was approached. And they said they wanted to do an operation. So the operation I chose to do was a mastectomy with sentinel node biopsy and immediate reconstruction using a latissimus dorsi flap. Unlike a lot of American surgeons, over here, a lot of the breast surgeons do their own reconstruction. Obviously, I didn't do microvascular reconstruction, but I did something like 900 LD flaps, which is probably the biggest number in Western Europe. And so I needed a patient. But we have a target. When we see a patient, you've got to operate within 21 days. That's the government target. So the BBC gave me this is we're going to be filming on this day. So I'm counting down the days and I'm saying, where's my patient? Where's my patient? This one's not right. That one's not right. And then I got the right patient, time-wise, absolutely perfect. But she had bilateral breast cancer. So instead of a 3.5-hour operation, it was a 7-hour operation. When it went out, they juggled and reduced it to 3.5 hours. And that patient is alive and well. It must be 20 years later.
And why did they?
When she had positive nodes.
And why did they decide to do this? Where did that come from?
Okay, so they were doing an initiative called Cancer and You, and they had chosen several different types of cancer, and they had like a whole week of different activities. And that documentary won the award of Best Documentary of the Year.
Oh, wow. That's great. That's great. Now, I want to ask you a little bit about the technique that you use to put your patients at ease. And you've mentioned it to me before, this concept of visualization.
So I've always felt, and I don't know that there's many papers written on this, so I can't give you the science for it, but I've always felt that a bit like 1984, George Orwell, power is knowledge. If you can see your cancer, then you can see what it is, you can visualize it in your mind, And if you visualize in your mind when you're on treatment, now, if you have no treatment, that's not good to visualize it. But if you're having treatment, then you can visualize that your cancer is being destroyed, is being reduced, if something is happening to it. So how to do that? Yes, you talk about it, but I would like to show people their cancer. So you look at the x-rays, you look at the scans, and you don't hide them behind a screen. You turn the screen round and you show the patient and you explain, you write down things. Now, I didn't use the internet and say, here's a web space, you go and look it up or do it there. I would draw pictures and I would try and use allegorical pictures to explain concepts. It was very interesting. I went with a friend last week who'd just been diagnosed with cancer, and I tried to get her to do this. And when I got back to her house, I explained to her husband with a series of pictures, because he wasn't able to come. I explained what the cancer is and how the treatment is going to affect it. Now, I brought a couple of props with me here.
What a surprise.
You might ask that question.
What a surprise.
Now, here I have
Yes.
a maglev train.
Yes.
This is the train they have in Shanghai.
Yes.
Why have I got it? Because my grandsons love trains, as you know. Anyway, so if I was dealing with DCIS, non-invasive cancer, I would say to my patients, I want you to visualize a train on the underground in London. You're on a train. But in your case, you've got non-invasive cancer. Your train comes into the station and the doors don't open. It just carries on through. So no cancer cells can get in and no cancer cells can get out. Once you have invasion, the doors can open. And if the doors open, there's a bad message. So that concept of non-invasive cancer is a great way of explaining we found this early. And it may be complicated to do the surgery, but you're not in danger.
There's a very good question that came in, which is sort of right along this line, which is what is your feeling about prophylactic mastectomies like with Angelina Jolie, where she carried a BRCA mutation and she did something ahead of time? Were you faced with that, and how did you counsel your patients?
So that is a difficult area. There is a lot of family history patients in this part, the southeast of England. We don't have a huge excess of Jewish Ashkenazis in this country, which would have a high risk. It's high in, there's a high risk in Iceland. So there's various gene pools that have a high risk, but you cannot by any means underestimate the potential damage that you might do. Damage physically, because not all reconstructions, if the patients want reconstructions, are good ones that will stand the test of time, and the psychological damage of being mutilated, you cannot underestimate. So I think people need to be extremely carefully counseled on the prospect of a prophylactic mastectomy, even when the evidence is compelling. Now, if you carry a BRCA gene, you've got, say, an 80% chance in your lifetime of developing breast cancer. There's a really strong driver for doing it. But remember, some people who've had a prophylactic mastectomy can still get breast cancer because you can't remove every single last cell,
Right.
especially if you're doing a reconstruction. So I think you need to choose your team very carefully.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Do you recognize that man?
I do.
Which lifetime was that in?
We came to visit you in Tucson.
How was the Jack Daniels in Tucson?
Well, I still prefer my slightly peaty single malts over a bourbon, I'm afraid.
Those look like two very shady characters in a
Yeah, yeah. I don't know.
in a yeah.
I don't know which one is Butch Cassidy, but you're on the left and I'm on the right.
That was a real moustache, I have to add. That was not something I pasted on. Now, look, I think we're getting towards the end. We've definitely got time for one more song. Could we have what could you come up with for us?
Well,
As
I'm
a
going to be
possible song, or maybe you could even slip in a couple if you really wanted to.
okay. Well, I'm gonna do a slightly more serious song. And
No.
this song I wrote last year. I don't know how much the folks in America know, but we're in the middle of a doctor's strike, and this strike is because junior doctors have been lagging behind in their pay. And when I say lagging behind, my daughter, who's a junior doctor, she's been qualified um, uh, over 10 years, gets the equivalent of £16 an hour. So what's that, about $10 an hour? A ridiculously small
20,
amount.
$20 an hour. The other way.
It's still
Very
hideous.
little.
Very little, and they have to pay for all their own exams, etc., etc. So I took the words of The Boxer by Simon and Garfunkel, and I wrote this little song. So it's a bit serious. I'm a junior doctor. My story must be told. They have pounded my resistance for rotas without quotas and no promises. Just lies and mess, still a man hears what he wants to hear if he works for the NHS. La la la, la 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 la. When I left my home and my family, the sun had yet to rise. Now curses, there's no nurses. In the quiet of the triage station, I run scared. Laying low, seeking out the mess quarters where off-duty people go. But management said it had to go. La la la. Don't blame Johnson, just blame Hunt. Lie, lie, lie. We all know he's a bit of a blunt person. La, 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 la. Getting only railway wages. I start looking for a job, but I get no offers. Just to come on from the staff at several agencies. I do declare there were times when I was so broke I took some contracts there. La la la, la 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 la. In the hearing stands that doctor, not a striker by his trade, but he carries the reminders of every time they clapped him during COVID, and he cries out in his anger and his pain, I'm not leaving, Hippocrates remains. La la la, la 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 la. La la la, everybody sing la 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 la
Lie, lie, lie.
la la
Lie, 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 lie. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. And I think we might just have time if we make it quick. If anybody was listening at the beginning, there were a lot of Tom Lehrer songs. There's a reason for that, because Mark and I used to drive around London singing Tom Lehrer songs whilst looking for Marx Brothers movies on a Saturday night.
Well,
And
I've got a Tom Lehrer song, but I think it would be better to sing one of the first songs that we did, and it was from a sketch called Sperm Lake. The
Oh,
subtitle
okay.
Sperm Lake or Les Syphilines. And in this sketch, there are a whole bunch of sperms that have either SPER or M on their front, and on their back they have an X or a Y. And
Yeah.
there's a bunch of eggs, and the sperms, most of the sperms, they burst through a big sort of diaphragm, and then they get killed by the spermicidal agents, but one survives. And
Yeah.
one survives, and he sings a touching duet with the remaining egg.
Okay.
If you were the only sperm in the world, and I was the only egg, nothing else would matter in the world today. We could go on loving in fallopian way, a spongy endometrium just made for two, somewhere to call our own. I could give such lovely genes to you, an X from me, and maybe a Y from you. If you were the only sperm in the world, and I was the only egg.
Love it. Okay. Well, I think that's a perfect, as they say, that's a perfect note to finish on, right?
I think so.
I think so. Listen, Mark, this has been a joy, a pleasure, and hopefully it's been recorded, it'll be available, and it'll always be something for you and me to look back on and be very proud of. I hope the audience has enjoyed it as much as I have, and I'm deeply grateful to Mark Kissin, FRCS, for joining us tonight. Please don't forget the tip jar, very important. I know the Marsh will be deeply grateful, and I'm not sure who next month's guest is going to be, but we'll have somebody for you. And with that,
Well,
Miss Brianna.
let me interrupt you and say before you go, thank you for the invitation. And as Groucho said, hello, I must be going.
I cannot stay. I have to say,
I
I
must be
must be going. Brianna, back to you.